Hi, I'm Judy Farrell, and this is the Chai Sessions, my podcast for Merchant City Yoga, where I talk with yoga pals old and new, trying to understand better what it is we're doing when we practice yoga and why we do it. This episode's the first in a short series I'm sharing called Ashtanga Love Notes. I feel Ashtanga's fallen a bit out of fashion and gets a bit of a bad rep for being too difficult, rigid, and old school. So I want to talk with friends who, like me, still practice and teach Ashtanga and still love it too. We'll talk about what it is we love, what keeps us coming back, and what challenges and highlights it's brought us along the way. Imagine these love notes handwritten and close to my heart. And so to my first guest on the series. She discovered Ashtanga yoga by chance in 1990. When on her way to work one day in London, she spotted a long line of people queuing down the road with yoga mats. Turns out it was just the hugely popular Derek Ireland and Radha Worrell visiting London to teach an Ashtanga yoga workshop. She joined them, and so began her love affair with Ashtanga. She was authorised to teach in 1995. The same year she started a family with John Scott, whom she met on her first trip to Mysore. She collaborated on the book Ashtanga Yoga with Lino Miele, the first of its kind to lay out the sequences and vinyasa count that are so much part of Ashtanga Yoga. And these days is based in Devon, leading Ashtanga workshops in the UK and around the world. It is, of course, the truly exceptional Lucy Crawford. Now, this is Lucy's second time on the podcast, and I made the mistake of re-listening to our first conversation before recording this one, and thought, oh heck, is there anything left we can talk about? Well, as it turns out, there is. We start our conversation talking about the enduring appeal of Ashtanga Yoga, its traditional roots and systematic approach, and how it provides a clear path and framework for yoga practice and for life. We explore the importance of breath as a means to connect everything in our bodies. And we also share some common misconceptions about Ashtanga Yoga and do our best to debunk them. And ahead of Lucy's next visit to Glasgow, we finish by talking about Tom Meyer's work on fascial lines and its application to our Ashtanga Yoga practice. Lucy sums it up so well when she says, it's all beautiful. I just loved this conversation, and I hope you do too. Hello, Judy. Lucy, thank you so much for joining me again. I can't believe it's been nearly a year since we last had a conversation over a little cup of tea.
Glass of water.
Yeah, I was actually thinking before I brought this over, I think it's got to the point now where I'm a little bit worried if I don't have a cup of tea, I might not have anything to talk about in these sessions.
It's actually a resource then. You're just bringing the cup.
Yeah, it's like a little comfort thing to have my cuppa sitting by us. So what I would really like to do is have this session, this chat, sit within a little podcast series that I'm doing called Ashtanga Love Notes. And that idea has come out of just a general sense that I have that maybe Ashtanga yoga is a little bit less popular, a little bit less favoured than it has been in the past. And so what I really wanted to do was just get together and have a chat with other people who are still practicing, still teaching Ashtanga after a really long time. And I know in the last session we talked about what brought you to yoga and how you found Ashtanga.
Yeah, I remember.
So I thought a really nice place to start this time would be, given that I have this feeling that Ashtanga is maybe just not quite as in fashion as it maybe once was, that what is it about Ashtanga that keeps you coming back, despite all the changes and challenges that life can throw at you, and also all of the changes that are happening in the world of Ashtanga and in the broader world of yoga. What is it that keeps you coming back to this practice?
Yeah, so I think I really like the fact that it's got such a traditional root. It kind of makes it feel like it's gone on for such a long time. And our lives are really short, aren't they, within context,
Yes.
long time. And it's I don't know, when I was in Mysore and I used to go off and look at the places that Guruji had been and taught yoga at the palace, the Mysore palace, and blah, blah, blah. And all the boys, you know, all their photographs. And there was something that at the time that made me feel like, so I'm stepping into something that's really held in a lineage. And, you know, obviously the relationship back to Krishnamacharya. And so it felt clear. And in a way that systematized approach gives a great clarity, like a path. And I think maybe the idea, like Ashtanga being 8 limbs, and you know, what were those 8 limbs? Because obviously asana is only one of the limbs, and you've got 4 more physical or ideological, obviously yama, niyama, and then asana and pranayama, first 4 limbs. And it's like, okay, so these are about how we can do life. So it gave more of a framework around, it wasn't just, oh, I'm doing yoga. There was a framework, and it made me feel like, aha, so now I've got all these clues as to how to make my life feel better, really, and how I could live better, how I might make better choices. But obviously, I'm human, and that's not
Yes.
what it is.
No.
But it's there, isn't it? And then there's that shift when we reach limb number 5, pratyahara, and it's kind of almost like a gateway between the more physical, practical experience of asana and breath and modes of living into the more spiritual side of finding stillness, finding what actually supports us, which is coming from a much deeper, wider field. So, yeah, for me, the 8 limbs meant a lot.
Yeah, and offers like a little bit of breadth and depth around perhaps some of the more obvious practices, like the yoga posture practice, like the breath work as
Yeah.
well. I'm
It's
wondering.
all wonderful. I mean, it's all beautiful, but it's lovely for me, I think I was a bit of a seeker of meaning in things.
Right, and
bringing that into a direct experience in my cells, in my body, not just an idea that I was gonna, live a certain way, or that idea that I'm spiritual. It's more, how can I live that? How can I bring that into something more grounded and more, life supporting?
and what is it about this particular yoga method? You know, because there are so many different styles, so many different ways to access yoga now, and you know, big picture, absolutely, it is all yoga. But about this particular method, about this particular style, what is it, do you think, makes it so effective?
So that's a question. Is it effective? Effective in what way?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Effective. I think breath is such an interesting topic, because we could go a
Yes.
whole life without even thinking about our breath. We might notice, oh, my breath sped up because I was running, but we, you know, it's we're being breathed, and it's autonomic. We don't have to think about it. But yoga brings us into the ujjayi breath, is us controlling the breath. And there must be, I don't know how many million people there are on the planet, but I don't think that everyone controls their breath. I'm sure there's whole lives lived. I remember Guruji saying about if we breathe really quickly, like we die quicker. Like there are.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we have a certain number of breaths.
yes, life is measured by the number of breaths.
And that makes me wonder about being a runner. And are we, are we speeding up that number of breaths that we've been given somehow? But then so it is the breath for me, and it's the fact that, where I'm working with my body field. And if you're in an asana and an asana is challenging the breath, which it ultimately does, to kind of discover what bandha are needed, not just mula bandha, but the bandha in your feet, pada bandha, which then connects to the pelvic floor, which connects to the diaphragm, which connects to your tentorium. So it's like how we can use the breath to connect everything in our bodies, because obviously embryologically we started as one cell. There's nothing separate, and yet we talk about our bodies as parts, and it's a whole. So the breath touches the whole. And so the Vyana, the Vayus, the vehicle for the breath, and Vyana Vayu is your whole body. It's all the fluids. It's how all the fluids, the blood, the lymph, the interstitial fluid, all the fluids are somehow integrated in a web. And I suppose that brings in fascia, because fascia is supported by the fluids. I love embryology. It's very, very interesting. Kind of when fascia comes in and starts, it's forming to support the tiny structures as they form. And so it's integrated so phenomenally through our whole bodies.
Yeah, woven through. Just what you were saying there made me think as well. I always find it quite interesting, when it's suggested that one of the aims of yoga is to join body, mind, and spirit. Because
it's
I'm kind of
already joined.
Yeah.
There's no separation. I think.
I kind of understand where people are coming from, and maybe it's more about recognizing that. But I'm like, actually, I think we'll find it's all joined up already.
It's all joined up already. So it's a process of remembering, maybe. Remembering. Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, that's good. That was good. Yes. And would we say recognizing? As well.
Or bringing that into a felt sense experience, and the realization that everything that happens to you emotionally, or wheels of mind that kind of keep going round, the ruminations are affecting the body. They're going to be reflected in the body. We are not there. We're not separate. There's nothing separate really here. In this one cell of me, it's all united. And so yoga is yoking and union. Is it bringing yoga? Maybe has this phenomenal capacity to bring us back in, out of fragmentation and into our original wholeness. So
big ask. What do you think are some of the most common misperceptions or misconceptions about Ashtanga that you've come across? And
I think one of them is it's really hard. It's a hard. I agree, but I would say yoga practice is hard work. But anything that you're really putting your attention into, there's effort. But then we can look for the fluid body and become more effortless. But it's like we need to find something before we can let it go. So if we haven't learned to kind of mobilize an ilium, we just move the hip joint. We don't realize that it's connected to half a pelvis. And we're kind of putting too much attention in moving a hip when actually it's a unified whole. So we can actually we can start really moving the whole ilium. I love all that work. I find it really gratifying, space between the SI joints in terms of movement. And it's like, but you need to find that and use it, which is work, until it becomes natural. So that's like all the asana. They become less effortful after much practice. So
yes, and that perception of
happy, yeah, for effort.
I was just gonna say that perception that people seem to have that it, because it's difficult at first, it means they're doing it wrong or doing it badly or they're not good at it. Because I think, for
challenged, I'm still challenged.
yes,
my breath is still challenged, and you go through hormonal changes and blah blah blah, and everything in your body is changing, and you're challenged again where you weren't challenged before. So you have to kind of go back and explore more and find a way of doing something which is less effortful, so it doesn't exhaust you. Or I always call it your energy bucket. And be mindful that you don't empty your bucket. Always leave a little bit in the bottom. You don't want to be, you want to be aware. Because I was often told, you'll reach a point in the practice where you've got nothing left. Particular poses do it to you, don't they? Like
yes, they do.
for example. It does all the strange things through the legs and the femoral nerve, and the kind of, the groins are really constricted, and the blood flow and the lymph flow. So you get all these and you want to get out, don't you? It's like, oh, I need to come out of this now.
Yes.
And then your energy bucket might kind of empty quite a lot. And then people would say in the olden days, oh, you'll get a second wind. But I'm not really one to wait for the second wind. Like, I'll continue to practice, but if I feel like, oh, I'm not getting a second wind here, then I'd rather be practicing the yama at that point and say,
yes.
where's the ahimsa. I don't want to hurt my whole. I don't want to empty me. And the truth, I'm exhausted now. I need to do some shoulder stand and lie down.
Yeah.
So it's like it's being truthful. It's being aware of your limitations. And I think that if you bash on through things, there's a payoff for that, and we can get hydrated, and that can, and I've seen that with people who just continue on, and they think it's all mind and that you must carry on and achievement, and I don't do that. I'm not into that. I want to be respectful to my body, my mind, my energy,
There's a few things came up just as you were chatting there. So just to speak to that last one, I think it is a tricky thing to recognise though, isn't it? It's like, when is my mind just playing tricks on me, trying to tell me that I'm tired and depleted and really it just can't be arsed doing this? And when it's an honest recognition of where you are. Because I love your bucket analogy. I'm going to keep that, if you don't mind, and clearly share it as my own rather than anything else. But I think it's a really lovely visual for reference and feedback. But like I said, that there is that piece about the mind's really smart, and if it's coming up to something difficult and challenging, it can be really slippery.
But I don't mean that, because the mind is always trying to, Guruji said that laziness was the biggest obstacle to yoga. And I really get that. So I mean it more on a felt sense level. Like you carry on and you know, even after you've had that, oh my gosh, there's nothing left in my bucket feeling.
Yeah.
There's nothing left in my body. And you carry on. And this idea of a second wind. So you use your breath and you stay with it. And you may then just continue on and it's fine. But if you get that feeling keeps coming, like, actually,
Right.
all I need to do now is rest. I've
Mm-hmm.
overworked. So there's this fine
Yeah.
balance. I've actually overworked that, and
Yeah.
it's used up too much of my bucket. And so the best thing right now is to just honor that I've done my practice. I'll do my finishing, and then I'll lie down. Because then tomorrow you're going to have your energy bucket. If it goes to empty, it's really hard to build it up again. It's like when we
Yes.
really do that, so if we look at that in a physiological way, it's kind of like an adrenal exhaust. It's
Okay.
like a we do, you know, we do that every day. We go until there's only this tiny amount left in the bucket at the bottom, and then
Yeah.
we're trying to function and do the rest of our lives, and there isn't really enough there, so we're irritable.
Oh my
Do you
goodness, it's
understand?
so,
So
yeah, it's so true. Especially with something like this where we are looking to do it most days as well. So
if we
so
can.
if we're emptying the bucket every single day, it's gonna get less, and we're playing with less and less, aren't we?
Yeah, and we're so prana, so it really comes down to the prana, and obviously we're bringing prana into the body through the breath, but also through the food. And so it's bringing the prana in. But, you know, there are limitations to how much prana you can be bringing in. So we have to listen to it somehow, like a gauge inside us, I feel. Yeah, but it's a really interesting conversation. I mean, I don't know for other people, but I definitely know for me.
Yeah. And I guess that then links into or talks to this sense of it's practicing, you're practicing the same every day. And that actually links up to something else I wanted to kind of loop back to, was when you said that you are still challenged by the practice, you still have those challenges. And it makes me
Huge.
think,
They're
oh my
huge.
God,
They're more
yes,
than they were when I was young.
yes. And when people go, do you not get bored just practicing the same sequence? I'm like, heck no, not just no, you have no idea.
Boredom
Um,
is a state of mind, and there's something switched off. I can't say I think I've ever been bored,
no,
ever,
no.
because my mind is too interested in too many things. So if there's boredom, then there's something that you're not realizing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not realizing the amazing form, and you know, there's so much going on. How much are you connecting to? Boredom is perhaps like you're not connected. You're not connecting into yourself.
No, not quite engaged.
Yeah, it's
And
not a non-engagement, and it's looking maybe more from the outside, like, oh, that asana. I mean, trikonasana is still a huge challenge.
yeah, yeah,
In fact,
still in.
most of the asana are still a challenge in terms of, I mean, I can do them and do them just as a flow through,
Yeah,
but I'm not really engaged. So that's me being disinterested in my presence. And
yeah.
how can I be disinterested in my presence? In the Buddha, somebody said to me recently that in the Buddhist understanding of things, you know, this is just a thought, that it took so much work to be incarnated into human form, so many lifetimes of work. And then here we are, and we've got it. And we've got the capacity to be the observed and the observer. Oh, wow. For me, boredom cannot exist because I'm here. I think it's exciting to really be engaged in how present am I in my practice, rather than I'm just doing Trikonasana. How much of me can I feel in Trikonasana? Am I in every cell of me? Or am I just looking at myself from the outside? Did I make the right shape? You know?
Yeah.
Or can I feel Sushumna here? Can I, you know, for me, there's an endless curiosity of question, you know?
Yeah. And almost without an answer as well, like that curiosity just every single time, because it's different.
It's
Every
different. It's
time.
never been the
It's
same. And my body's changing all the time. So therefore, the asana, which is just the form that I'm asking my body to make, is never going to be the same. My presence is different every day. So yeah. And I love Ashtanga yoga in terms of when life is hard and there is a kind of strict format, even though I will go off piste because I've got one of those minds that goes, oh, I've just related that asana, I've had a break.
Yes.
Oh, and I'm just going to try and see what's the same, you know, so I will do that. But I like it that we can go back to something that doesn't change when we're really needing some structure in our lives.
Yes.
And it takes us to a practice where we can just do it and breathe and not judge, but we feel like, oh, we've moved. I've moved my joints. I've moved my fluids. I've moved my prana. I've moved my nadis.
Yes.
It's great. It's set there for you to use as that structural kind of set.
Yeah. And in that, it's offering us a kind of container and support as well.
Yeah.
And actually that talks really nicely to one of the other misconceptions I hear a lot about Ashtanga yoga and it's around the rigidity of it, the fixedness of it. But actually it can be so helpful as well.
Oh, I just don't feel that about it. I like the I think there's this thing for me though with the series, and I'm very analytical, and John and I both used to analyze things really deeply in terms of what was happening in the joints and and the kind of the progression, and it's so well thought out. But at the same time, you know, if I was coming from another point of view, say I was bringing the idea of muscle energy techniques, which I often do, into the practice. And I'm thinking, Guruji once said, pose, counter pose, so much part of, but then when you're in forward flexion all the time, what is counterposing in the psoas and in the, yeah, you know, it's forward bending. So we're really, really stretching the western side of the body initially. But primary series was supposed to be about left, right. It was about balancing the two sides of the body. And then at Navasana is that kind of putting both sides in together. And I mean, I just have one of those really analytical minds. So sometimes I want to go Paschimottanasana, Shalabhasana, second series. Paschimottanasana, Dhanurasana, second series. So your pose, counter pose. I wonder, there's a question for me. I'd like to ask Guruji now, is it so important that the western side of the body gets open first? like primary series seems so much about stretching the back of the body.
back body,
And I could
yes.
relate, you know, we could talk for hours. I could relate that to the embryology and the endoderm, ectoderm, the, you know, yolk sac. And I'm fascinated, I'm curious. But once we have been practicing for a while, I think it's very important to really start working the back of the body.
Yes.
Not just stretching it, like engaging it. And we've got one place, which is an upward dog. And one of the things that I have been doing is getting students to do 5 breaths there, because I want, it's an asana. And we only meet it in a breath, in
a moment,
in an inhalation, in a moment. And I think it's a, you know, a really helpful thing to start engaging the back body. I wish there were some, I wish Shalabhasana was in primary series.
Yeah, I do sneak it into some vinyasa if people are having trouble. And absolutely, I mean, even, you know, upward facing dog as an asana, it's actually quite tricky to find an intelligent upward facing dog just in that moment, that it can take a few breaths to really find the action to engage the back body, to not just be dumping into the lower back and kind of hanging off the shoulders a bit.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's
So
a lot of shoulder work.
Yeah.
And opening the chest, lifting. And you know, when you go back again to like when we're in utero and we're fluidic, we're in flexion. And as soon as we're born, we're in gravity in a different way. And the beginning of the forming of the connections neurologically for the muscles, it's the neck, it's the head. So we're starting to develop these secondary curves, and it's the cervical curve and the lumbar curve. And yet then we're doing so much forward bending in the primary series, and we're not necessarily really kind of maintaining those secondary curves. So it's something about, it's just really interesting material to talk
about. And having the spine move in all directions. Yeah, and move regularly. What do you think about how people are relating to their bodies these days, and have you seen that change over the time you've been working with people and their bodies?
Yeah, I think the somatic that you know, there's been Feldenkrais, I suppose, was the beginning of that, really listening in and slowing things down to listen to movements. And then there have been various extraordinary beings like Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who is absolutely I love her. And people who have dedicated their lives to really understanding movement in the minutiae and where we move from. I think that work is profound, and it can bring change to the neurology. So yeah, I think that more people are interested in somatics, and that's kind of, and I think that's really helpful. And other work, yeah, so within the cranial field, there's a lovely lady called Cheriona Menzum-Sills, and she did a lot of continuum. That comes from Emily, I can't remember her surname, but there are these really embodied practices, and I'm sure there's a myriad of them, but I do think that there has been more a shift towards that over the years. Like when I first did yoga was that for me. I mean, probably all those other practices were out there, but they they weren't as visible at that time. Yes, so I love that, because I think it really helps people with their yoga when they slow things down. And I do a lot of teaching, you know, just really feeling a movement. And where are you initiating that movement from? Where can you feel it? Are you moving, you know, just even a simple radius over ulna, or ulna under radius in this movement? It's so fascinating. We can get really detailed, and we can learn to move parts of us just by putting our attention there. So a great one is in the bath, you know, when you're looking at your toes and you're going, I'm going to try and move my toe from my cuboid bone. It's like I'm into that level of living in my body. I sit there looking at my feet going, go on, can you? And I'm really in there, seeing if I find the movement rather than just moving the little bit at the end. I'm trying to find it from the tarsals, or the same with my hands, from the carpals, or, you know, with my clavicles, can I move my clavicle? Or, you know, for me, it's an endless fascination. So
Yeah,
I'm
and
slightly obsessed, I suppose.
yeah, no wonder you don't have a television, Lucy. You don't need
I
one.
don't need one.
No. Yeah, and that speaks to, like, sometimes, you know, in class, you know, when I'm asking someone to move their arm, for example, like, you can see that they're just moving it from the hand end, and so I'll try and encourage them to move the arm from the other end, if you like, so it's coming from
You can
a kind of
move
more
it like
central
an
place.
glenohumeral joint,
Yeah,
but then you can move it in an integrated way and feel both the glenohumeral joint, the acromioclavicular joint, and the sternoclavicular joint, because they're all part of the movement of an arm, and the shoulder blade. So it becomes
yeah,
and I love teaching those things, because I play with those things in my own body, and then I find that I can bind with
yes,
much more length than, and if someone's just going like that to bind, they've
yeah,
already locked off.
yeah. The shoulders just rolled forward and got stuck.
It's all
Yeah,
shortened, all the tissues shortened.
yeah,
There's this lovely kind of way of doing that openly.
yeah. It
But
feels to me,
you have to come in first. You
yeah.
have to find the movement.
Yeah, it's almost like counterintuitive, isn't it? Because moving from a more central point actually feels to me like it makes the movement more expansive, that there's more space there.
Yeah.
I guess that takes us nicely on to kind of conscious of time now, Lucy.
Yeah,
So
we better hurry
yeah,
on.
it's
Yeah.
clear we could just sit and chat here all day, although I
Yes.
might have to top up my cup. Um, and it's just, we're talking just a few weeks before you come back to Glasgow to visit. And I wanted to chat to you about the workshops that we're offering over the weekend, because what you're going to be doing is working with Tom Myers. So Tom Myers of Anatomy Trains fame, the Tom Myers fascial lines, but within the Ashtanga practice. And I think I mentioned to you before how excited I am, because it's basically two of my favourite geeking out things. So Tom Myers talking about the fascial connections through the body, and Ashtanga and the yoga postures, and how they all join up, and we're joining dots between all the different postures and practices. So I wondered if you could maybe talk a little bit about, well, how you found Tom Myers' work, and about a little bit about how it came about that you started to incorporate it into your work with the
Yeah,
Ashtanga method.
so, it was my my friendship with David Kyle, back in, I don't know how long ago, and we were both body workers and really interested in fascia, and I remember him giving me some little video things. And then I'd already got Tom Meyer's book when he first brought it out, because in a way I was waiting, when you're waiting for someone to come forward and start really, obviously there's loads of Robert Schlepp and there's lots of fascial people, but yeah, I just started reading all his stuff, and he's updated and updated. The more dissections he does, the more, he's changed things from the original book. And I've still got the original book. I really should buy the updated version, but I've done a lot of his online courses. And yeah, for me, the relationship of my fascial body and yoga. I mean, you can't do yoga without being in your fascial body. You can look at yoga you can look from the bones. It's just attention and where, your point of focus, isn't it? So I could do a whole workshop just on bones or moving from bones. But really, bones are fascia, really, they're connected.
Yes.
Tissue, they're densified connective tissue. But so I love Tom Meyer's never-ending curiosity into what is continuous. And then from my point of view, everything is continuous. So I've got a kind of cranial viewpoint on this, and but he's trying to bridge a gap in a way between medical understanding, and just like of course, when you do a practice, you're stretching every fascial line. But I just got interested in, okay, so let's look at this. Let's do a workshop looking at the spiral line and it's very clearly designated and it's quite complex. And I'll try and keep it as simple as possible, but just an orientation, because where we put our attention gives us new experience. So my sense was, okay, I've been doing all of this, personal study, and I'm using it in my own practice to really connect to certain lines. The spiral line is my greatest interest. And how that shows up in the practice, and how we can put our attention in the very beginning of it, and then where it ends, or where it ends, where it begins and where it ends, or really does it begin and end anywhere, and actually it's just integrated, but how can we get more space? So for me, everything is about finding more space in the body, which then I believe gives us more space in the mind, because I don't think it's separate. I think that the more space we find in the body, it begins to give us space to change our thinking patterns, because it's changing us neurologically. It's being able to move the minutiae. It's the ability to hold an idea of and feel a fascial line through your body as best as possible. And it just wakes up the body. It wakes up the tissues. And that's what I'm really interested in. I'm interested in waking up.
Yeah, tapping into that whole body, that full body experience.
We have front line, back line, we have arm lines. It's just beautiful.
Isn't it miraculous and amazing? So, Lucy, I think that's a really nice place to end. And if possible, I'm even more excited now about your workshops than I was before.
So am I.
And like really excited just about the Ashtanga practice again, looking at it, I guess, through a slightly different lens as well. And I think that's one of the things. So to kind of to hook back to where we started about what keeps us coming back to this practice, it for me, it's always interesting. There's always something new to experience, isn't there?
And don't you feel good afterwards?
Always. Best relaxation ever.
You start the day feeling one thing and you're a bit crumpled at this as I get older, I feel a bit crumpled, and then I'll get up and I'll do my movements and my practice, and I feel alive. I feel, that there's life and light in my body. Yeah.
Yes, perfect place to end, Lucy. Thank you so, so much. And I look forward to seeing you in person.
I look forward to seeing you too.
Thank you.
Can't wait to be in Glasgow.
Lucy returns to Merchant City Yoga Friday the 1st to Sunday the 3rd of November 2024. She'll be sharing 3 mornings of Mysore style assisted self-practice, workshops exploring Tom Myers fascial lines in her yoga practice on Saturday and Sunday afternoon, and a very special workshop for teachers on the Friday where she'll work with hands-on assists for the postures of primary and intermediate series. Her years of experience in holistic bodywork and Ashtanga yoga define Lucy's gentle and profound energy when teaching. You'll find all the details and booking on the workshops page of the website, merchantcityyoga.com. These conversations are unedited, but I'd like to shout out Steph Northcote for smoothing out the wrinkles at the beginning and end of every episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. You can even follow, rate and review to help others find us too. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.